December 12th, 1910, high noon in the heart of Manhattan. A young woman waves to a friend, turns a corner on Fifth Avenue, and vanishes from the face of the earth. This is the enduring mystery of Dorothy Arnold, a case of wealth, secrets, and a century of silence. Project 5, M5007. Dorothy Arnold was born into the highest echelons of New York society. Her family's name was synonymous with perfume and power. The Arnolds were listed alongside the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. Their reputation was their most guarded asset. Dorothy was 25, a graduate of Bryn Mawr College, and by all accounts, the jewel of her father's eye. She was expected to marry well, to continue the lineage of the Gilded Age elite. But Dorothy had other plans. Beneath the silk and pearls, Dorothy harbored a secret ambition. She wanted to be a writer, a career her father Francis found laughable. He told her, a good writer can write anywhere, effectively denying her request to move to Greenwich Village to pursue her craft. Her home at 108 East 79th Street was a palace to the outside world, but for Dorothy it was increasingly becoming a gilded cage. The expectations of her class were a weight she struggled to carry. The silence in the mansion was often deafening. She was leading a double life. For months, she had been in a secret relationship with George Griscom Jr., an unemployed engineer. He was 42 and wealthy, but the Arnolds considered him entirely unsuitable for their daughter. Weeks before she vanished, Dorothy had lied to her parents, claiming she was visiting a friend when she was actually meeting Griscom in Boston. The trip had left her shaken. The cracks in her perfectly manicured society life were widening with every passing mile. The morning of December 12th began with a deceptively normal breakfast. Dorothy sat with her mother, discussing the day's plans. Nothing in her demeanor suggested that this would be the last morning she would ever spend in the 79th Street mansion. She told her mother she was going to Fifth Avenue to find a dress for her sister Marjorie's upcoming debutante party. It was a routine errand, a simple task for a woman of her standing. No one could have predicted the outcome. Her mother offered to go with her, but Dorothy declined, insisting she could handle the shopping alone. She stepped out into the crisp noon air of Manhattan, carrying approximately $30, a small fortune at the time. By 1:45 p.m., she arrived at Park and Tilford's on 59th Street and Fifth Avenue. She was a regular customer there. She bought a box of chocolates and charged them to her father's account. The clerk later reported she seemed cheerful. Her next stop was Brentano's on 27th Street. Dorothy spent some time browsing the shelves of the famous bookstore. She purchased a book of essays titled Engaged Girls' Sketches, a title that, in hindsight, feels heavy with irony. Just outside the store, she ran into an old friend, Gladys King. They spoke for several minutes about the upcoming party. Gladys noticed nothing unusual. Dorothy mentioned she was going to walk through Central Park before returning home for dinner. Gladys watched as Dorothy waved a final goodbye and turned the corner. It was exactly 2 p.m. She was never seen again. In that single moment, a woman of wealth and status walked out of her life and into a century of silence. When Dorothy failed to return for dinner at 7 p.m., a quiet panic began to settle over the Arnold mansion. Her chair remained empty. Her father, Francis, a man of rigid schedules, could not fathom his daughter's tardiness. As the hours ticked by, the panic grew. But it was a panic contained within the walls of the mansion, hidden from the world. They called her friends, her classmates, but no one had seen her. The night stretched into a cold, terrifying morning. When Dorothy failed to return for dinner at 7 p.m., a quiet panic began to settle over the Arnold mansion. It was the first of many lies. The family was more afraid of social disgrace than they were of Dorothy's possible fate. Fearing the scandal of a runaway daughter, Francis Arnold chose a path of extreme and perhaps fatal secrecy. For 6 weeks, the police were not informed. The case was kept entirely within a tight circle of family and lawyers. Instead of the law, the Arnolds hired the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. They conducted a shadow investigation. The Pinkertons scoured the city under assumed names, looking for Dorothy in hospitals, morgues, and even jails. They showed her portrait to nurses and clerks in secret, always careful not to reveal her true identity to the public. They found nothing. No woman matching Dorothy's description had been admitted or found in the weeks following her disappearance. The search went international. Dorothy's brother John and her mother sailed to Italy to find the one man who might have answers. They were heading to Florence to confront George Griscom, the man Dorothy had been seeing in secret. They were heading to Florence to confront George Griscom, the man Dorothy had been seeing in secret. Griscom claimed he knew nothing. He was devastated to learn of Dorothy's disappearance and offered his full cooperation. By late January 1911, the family could hide the truth no longer. Francis Arnold finally held a press conference. He produced letters Dorothy had written to him, which spoke of her depression and her sense of failure as a writer. He offered a $1,000 reward, but the trail was already 6 weeks cold. The damage of their silence was done. The disappearance of Dorothy Arnold became a national obsession. Her face was on every front page in America. The file remains open. The truth, if it still exists, is buried somewhere deep beneath the pavement of Manhattan. Francis Arnold publicly insisted that his daughter had been kidnapped and murdered in Central Park. It was his preferred narrative. He believed she had been attacked and her body disposed of, but the police found no evidence of a struggle or a crime. The Central Park Reservoir was frozen solid at the time. A body could not have been dumped there without leaving a visible trace. If Dorothy had been murdered in the park, the city would have found her remains when the spring thaw finally arrived. They never did. If Dorothy had been murdered in the park, the city would have found her remains when the spring thaw finally arrived. They never did. Police raided the clinic in 1916, suspecting it was a front for illegal medical procedures involving the wealthy. Years later, a far more sinister theory emerged. It involved a clinic in Bellevue, Pennsylvania, known as the House of Mystery. A doctor at the clinic, H.E. Lutz, allegedly confessed that a woman matching Dorothy's description died there after a botched procedure. He claimed she had checked in under an assumed name, died of complications, and her body was disposed of in the clinic's furnace. The theory was terrifyingly plausible for many. It explained the lack of a body and the need for absolute secrecy. But Francis Arnold dismissed the story as ridiculous. He refused to believe his daughter would have been involved in such a scandal. Others turned to Dorothy's own words for clues. She had recently received a second rejection for her short story, The Poinsettia of Flames. The magazine's rejection had been harsh, mocking her lack of talent. For an aspiring writer, it was a devastating blow. Was Dorothy's disappearance a final tragic act of despair? Had her literary failure driven her to a desperate conclusion? In her final letter to Griscom, she wrote, "All I can see ahead is a long road with no turning." It sounded like a goodbye. Boats dragged the river for weeks, looking for any sign of the heiress. They found nothing but the debris of the city. Was Dorothy's disappearance a final tragic act of despair? Had her literary failure driven her to a desperate conclusion? The theory of suicide in the East River was widely discussed. The freezing dark water could easily hide a body forever. But there was another possibility, that Dorothy simply chose to walk away from her stifling life and start over. Brochures for transatlantic ocean liners were found in her room, suggesting she had been dreaming of an escape to Europe. However, her passport and all her expensive jewelry were left behind. To flee without resources would have been a massive challenge. If she did run away, she did so as a ghost, leaving no paper trail and no way to support herself in a new world. In 1916, a convict named Edward Glenoris made a startling claim from his prison cell. He said he knew where Dorothy was buried. He claimed a wealthy man had paid him $250 to help bury a woman's body in a New Rochelle cellar. Police took his claim seriously. They excavated several locations in New Rochelle, digging through dirt and stone in search of the truth. But they found nothing. Glenoris's story, like so many others, turned out to be a fabrication or a dead end. Francis Arnold spent a staggering $250,000 searching for his daughter over the next decade. His fortune bought him private eyes, international investigations, and thousands of leads, but it couldn't buy a single answer. By the time of his death in 1922, Francis had grown bitter and exhausted. He publicly stated he believed Dorothy was dead. The search that had consumed his life and his fortune ended not with a resolution, but with a weary, public surrender. His will was a final cold statement. He left Dorothy nothing, writing that she was no longer a resident of the state. It was a legal erasure of the daughter who had brought so much mystery and potential shame to the Arnold name. The silence that had protected their social standing in 1910 had become a permanent part of the family's legacy. The Dorothy Arnold case fundamentally changed how the New York Police Department handled missing persons reports. It led to more standardized procedures, ensuring that the delay of the Arnolds would not be repeated in future cases. But for all the progress in investigation, Dorothy herself remained the ultimate symbol of the unexplained. She was the girl who never came back, a cautionary tale for a gilded age that valued propriety over truth. A century has passed since she walked down Fifth Avenue. The world she knew has been replaced by steel and glass. But the mystery of that December afternoon remains as sharp and as haunting as the winter air in 1910. Every door has been opened, every lead has been followed to its end, yet the file on Dorothy Arnold remains open. The truth is a shadow that continues to elude the light. We may never know what she was thinking as she turned that corner. We are left with only the fragments of a life, a wave, a book of essays, and a box of chocolates. All that remains of Dorothy, and a silence that has outlasted her family, her fortune, and the very era that defined her. A silence that remains absolute. Which theory do you find most convincing? Was she a victim of her family's propriety, or did she find the freedom she sought? Share your thoughts in the comments. The most enduring mysteries often find their answers in the collective memory of history. Tell us which vintage mystery we should open next. The past is full of shadows, and we are here to explore them. Your suggestions drive our journeys into the unexplained. Let us know what secrets you want to uncover. Subscribe to Never Solved for more journeys into the unexplained. Thank you for walking through the shadows of history with us. Until next time, keep looking for the truth. Some secrets are just waiting for the right moment to be told.